Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of The Sauce. We are into the semifinals here. College football playoff semifinals. 4 teams left. Went 4-0 personally in the quarterfinals. You'll love to see it. In the second round of the playoffs, went 4-0 in those games. Hopefully that positivity continues. Got 2 great ones here. In this video, we're talking about Thursday night, Notre Dame, Penn State. Let's do it.
Welcome to The Sauce.
All right, like I said, we got Notre Dame, Penn State. This one is the Capital One Orange Bowl. Penn State is catching 1.5 currently, pretty much across the board. Total sitting at 44.5. I do see a couple 45s out there. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action seems to be coming in on the Notre Dame side pretty heavily. Over 65% of the tickets, over 65% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Notre Dame offense against the Penn State defense. Obviously, we're in the Final Four here, the semifinals. We're going to see a lot of graphics with a lot of green on it. Notre Dame offensively, 9th in OFEI, 6th in yards per play, 31st in success rate. The Penn State defense, 8th, 15th, and 11th. So we got a showdown here. Obviously, if we're talking about the Notre Dame offense, we got to talk about the run game. This is an offense that needs to run the football to be successful. The offensive line's done a great job creating space so far this year. 11th in run blocking grade, 13th in line yards, 16th in stuff rate. That being said, they should have their hands full against this Penn State defensive front. 32nd, 4th in line yards. They're 4th in line yards, 3rd in stuff rate. Teams have really not been able to generate push against this Penn State defensive front, and they showed us that. In the first 2 rounds of the college football playoff, SMU, 36 carries, 58 yards, 1.6 yards per carry. Boise State, 40 carries, 108 yards, 2.7 yards per carry. So back-to-back games in the college football playoff where teams were not able to run the ball in this Penn State defense. Now, let's not pretend that nobody was able to run the ball in this Penn State defense all season. That's not exactly true. Both Ohio State and Oregon were able to successfully run the ball in Penn State. 53.2% success rate per rush, those 2 teams in those 2 games. 4.47 yards per carry. So 2 teams were able to run the ball in Penn State. I mean, if you look at the right side of this graphic, though, their other 8 Big Ten games, under 92 rushing yards allowed per game, 35.5% success rate per rush, just about 3 yards per carry. So there were 2 games where teams were able to run the ball a little bit against Penn State. Now, you might think that's good news. If you're a Notre Dame fan or you plan on betting Notre Dame, you might look at this graphic and say, hey, Notre Dame's rushing attack, I'd put it on the level of Ohio State and Oregon in terms of running the football, and I think that's fair. Not to mention, it looks like Jeremiah Love is going to play for Notre Dame. He left the Georgia game, I believe, in the second quarter. Just 6 carries, 19 yards. He's very obviously an important piece of the offense. From what I'm reading, it looks like he's on track to play. So maybe Notre Dame, we put him on the same level as Ohio State and Oregon, and maybe they're able to run the ball in Penn State. Here's the thing, though. When you really take a close look at the Notre Dame rushing attack, I mean, every time they saw a tough defense, they weren't really able to run the ball very successfully. This is just the regular season here. On the season, they averaged 6.4 yards per carry, 48% success rate per rush, over 225 rushing yards per game. Elite rushing numbers on the full season. In their only 2 regular season games against top 20 defenses, 40.7% success rate per rush, 4.24 yards per carry. Not that they were shut down, but I mean, both times they saw top 20 run defenses, they weren't really able to run the ball that successfully. And then in the first round against Indiana, sure, you look at the final box score, they had 5.5 yards per carry. They had a 98-yard touchdown run in there from Jeremiah Love. If you take that 198-yard run out, Notre Dame had 34 carries for 95 yards in the game. 2.7 yards per carry. So they weren't really consistently running the ball in Indiana. Now, last week against Georgia, the rushing numbers look pretty decent here for Notre Dame. 37 carries, 154 yards, 4.2 yards per carry. That's solid, especially against a defense like Georgia. But here's the thing. What have we been talking about with this Georgia defense? They struggle with mobile quarterbacks. That's been the case all year for Georgia. Basically, every single time they saw a mobile quarterback, they struggled. And if you look at Notre Dame's rushing breakdown in that game, Riley Leonard had 14 carries, 80 yards, 5.7 yards per carry. Everyone else on the team, 23 carries, 74 yards, 3.2 yards per carry. So even the game against Georgia, I wouldn't say they were successful in handing the ball off, running the ball. Now, Jeremiah Love did get hurt in the second quarter in that game. But even the game against Georgia, it was pretty much the quarterback running the ball, not necessarily handing the ball off, finding success. So I don't know how much success Notre Dame's offense is going to have handing the ball off or trying to establish the run against this Penn State defense. It's going to be tough, and that is huge because look at this. This is the Georgia game, which they won comfortably. 23-10 was the final score. On standard downs, 39% success rate. 24% success rate on passing downs, meaning if you get Notre Dame into a 2nd and 11, 3rd and 7, you're getting off the field. They do not do well in these passing downs. So, yeah, maybe they're able to make some plays on the ground here against Penn State, but every single time they get into a passing down, Penn State's defense gets off the field. It's hard to sustain drives that way. And we saw what this Penn State defense did to Kevin Jennings and the SMU passing attack, who, by the way, one of the more explosive passing attacks in the country, a much more explosive passing attack than Notre Dame. In that first-round game, Kevin Jennings, 20 of 36, 195 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, a 93.6 passer rating. By far his worst game since being named the starting quarterback. He hasn't played this poorly since he came off the bench for Preston Stone earlier in the season against BYU. It was a terrible game for Kevin Jennings. The Penn State defense really shut that passing attack down. Now, in the second round, you might point at Madsen's numbers and say, Kyle, Madsen had opportunities to make some throws, which is true. 23 of 35, 304 yards through the air, a touchdown, 3 picks he still threw, a 131 passer rating. He did make some throws in that game, and weirdly, he had time in the pocket. If you were watching this game, that game, especially in the second half, you were like, why can't Penn State put pressure on Madsen? And here's a huge reason why. Abdul Carter left that game in the first quarter. He barely played in the Boise State game. If you don't know who that is, I mean, that's their superstar NFL edge rusher there. He left that game in the first quarter. He's on track to play here against Notre Dame. So we should see that elite Penn State pass rush back. The one we saw against SMU, we should see it back in this one. And this is a Notre Dame offensive line that's had problems in pass protection this year. I was talking about it last week. Heading into the Georgia game, so heading into the second round game against Georgia, Notre Dame had only played 2 games all year against top 25 rated pass rushes. One was Louisville, and Riley Leonard was pressured on 40% of his dropbacks in that game. That's a lot. The other one was Indiana the previous week, and Riley Leonard was pressured on 45% of dropbacks in that game. So then they played Georgia, and Riley Leonard, 15 of 24, 90 yards, a touchdown, a passer rating of 107.8. You mean to tell me every single time Riley Leonard has seen a top-tier defense, a top-tier pass rush, he hasn't produced in terms of throwing the ball? Penn State, if Abdul Carter plays, might be better than all 3 of those teams in terms of pressuring the passer. Definitely don't like that if you're betting Notre Dame in this game. And Riley Leonard, we talked about his numbers under pressure. I've said this multiple times this year. Huge dip in production when he experiences pressure. Now, he doesn't take sacks. He doesn't turn the ball over. So that's huge. But QB rating, huge production dip. Yards per attempt down to an F. So if you get pressure on Riley Leonard, he'll escape. He'll get the ball out. He'll throw it away. He won't take the sack. He won't turn it over. He doesn't make many plays with his arm. Now, if you're looking to back Riley Leonard and the Notre Dame passing attack in this game, I do have something for you. Penn State runs a ton of man coverage. Actually, both of these teams do. But Penn State, 12th in the country in man coverage frequency. Notre Dame, in terms of throwing the ball this year, much better against man coverage. In fact, they've been pretty terrible trying to throw the ball on zone. So I suppose that's something if you're looking to back Riley Leonard here. But in my opinion, as a whole on this side of the ball, Notre Dame's going to struggle to run the ball. And Riley Leonard, I don't trust him against these elite pass rushers. I don't trust him against these elite defenses. Should be tough sledding for the Notre Dame offense in this game. I'm sure they're able to run the ball a little bit because they are an elite dual threat rushing attack, but this Penn State defense is good. And if Abdul Carter is going to be on the field, they should be able to give Notre Dame's offense all kinds of problems. But what about the matchup on the other side of the ball? We got the Penn State offense against the Notre Dame defense, and shocker, we're looking at green across the graphics here. Notre Dame defensively 2nd in DFEI, 5th in yards per play allowed, 12th in success rate. The Penn State defense 4th, 3rd, and 5th. We got a battle on this side as well. But one thing I want to point out before we switch graphics, look at the Notre Dame numbers against the run. Notre Dame might be vulnerable to the run here. 25th in yards per carry allowed, 83rd in success rate per rush, 13th in effective rush. And if you look at the Notre Dame run defense numbers across the season, now this is just the regular season here. What I did was I isolated their games against top 25 offenses, but I took Georgia Tech out because Haynes King didn't play in that game. So obviously Georgia Tech without Haynes King was not a top 25 offense. So Notre Dame in their games against top 25 offenses minus the Georgia Tech game, 48% success rate per rush, over 4.7 yards per carry, over 189 rushing yards allowed per game. They got run on when they saw good offenses this year. And I mean, even in their other regular season games, 3.35 yards per carry allowed is obviously elite. 42% success rate per rush. So this Notre Dame run defense, by no means would I ever say it's bad. I wouldn't call the Notre Dame run defense elite. Now, they did start the playoffs off with back-to-back great games defensively against the run. Indiana was held to 27 carries, 63 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. Georgia was held to 29, 66, and 2.3. So if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're probably pointing at these two games and saying, screw you. Who are you to say our run defense isn't that good? We just shut the run down in back-to-back playoff games. And you're right. Not trying to take credit away for these two games. That being said, we do have to point out that these are both passing offenses. Indiana is a pass-first offense all the way. Georgia hasn't been able to run the ball all season. Georgia hasn't run the ball successfully since week 3. Georgia couldn't run the ball on anybody. So I'm not throwing Notre Dame a parade for shutting down the run game from two passing offenses. This is not Indiana's run game. This is not Georgia's run game. This is Penn State, and they are on a heater. In the last 5 games of the regular season, including the Big Ten championship game against Oregon, over 225 rushing yards per game, over 5.9 yards per carry, 53.7% success rate per rush. And how do they follow that heater up? Oh, by running the ball in back-to-back playoff games against two good run defenses. SMU has a great defensive front, actually one of the best defensive fronts in the ACC. 40 carries, 189 yards, 4.7 yards per carry against them. Then they follow that up against Boise, who, granted, is a Mountain West defense, but they've been strong against the run all year. 41 carries, 216 yards, 5.3 yards per carry. So this Penn State run game has really come on. Notre Dame has shown us they're vulnerable to the run. I think Penn State's going to be able to run the ball in this game. I mean, this is a Notre Dame defensive front that struggled to stay on the line of scrimmage all year. 115th in stuff rate, 71st in line yards. Penn State's offensive line, 17th and 34th. So, yeah, I think Penn State's going to run the football in this game. Now, what about the matchup for Drew Aller? And we don't even need to switch this graphic yet because this is a concern here for Penn State. Notre Dame's defensive front. We talked about how they've struggled to stay on the line of scrimmage against the run, but they can pressure the passer. They're 17th in pressure rate, 15th in sack rate, 25th in pass rush grade. Penn State's offensive line, solid in terms of creating space in the run, but hasn't been the best pass protection in the world. Notre Dame should definitely be able to create some pressure on Drew Aller in this game. And this is a Notre Dame pass defense that kind of answered the criticism, I'll say. During the regular season, they had excellent numbers against the pass. Mayava and USC were able to make some throws on them in the finale in Week 14. 360 yards, 7.3 yards per attempt. In the other 11 regular season games, I mean, under 140 passing yards allowed per game. And what did I say about Notre Dame's pass defense entering the Indiana game? I said they haven't played any quarterbacks. Here are their schedule here. Connor Wegman in the opener. I mean, Tyler Shuck in Louisville. My argument was the only dangerous passing attack they've seen is Mayava and USC, and they were able to throw the ball on them. So I said this Notre Dame pass defense is overvalued. They haven't seen any quarterbacks this year. Well, they shut me up quickly in that Indiana game because Curtis Rourke couldn't do shit against the Irish defense. 9 of 19, 94 yards. This is excluding the 2 garbage time touchdown drives at the end. He couldn't do anything through the air. And that's Indiana. That's a dangerous passing attack. They shut it down. And then last week against Georgia, granted it was a backup quarterback, but it's still Georgia, one of the better passing attacks in the country. Gunnar Stockton really didn't do much. I mean, he wasn't absolutely terrible, but 20 of 32, 234 yards, a touchdown, a 134 passer rating. This is a pass-first offense all the way. This is an elite SEC pass-first offense. Couldn't do much against Notre Dame. So my criticism of Notre Dame's pass defense was definitely silenced quickly in the 2 playoff games. They looked great against the pass, and Drew Aller, I mean, the last 3 games hasn't been all that great. They were able to run the ball successfully on Oregon. Drew Aller really wasn't that great throwing the ball. He threw a couple of picks in that game. SMU, he had a 107 passer rating. Wasn't really that good. He was okay against Boise, a 149 passer rating, but Boise's a Mountain West defense that's been susceptible to the pass all year. Boise State, I'll give their front 7 some credit. They've been solid against the run, but that's not a good pass defense. A 149 pass rating against Boise State, I'm not that impressed with that. So Drew Aller not playing his best football right now against a Notre Dame defense that just shut down Indiana's passing attack and Georgia's passing attack. Safe to say I don't have a lot of faith in Penn State throwing the ball on Notre Dame's defense. That being said, if you are trying to back the Penn State offense here, I do have a couple things for you. We talked before about how Riley Leonard struggles when pressure, so the Penn State pass rush should be a problem for Riley Leonard. Well, on this side of the ball, Notre Dame should be able to create pressure on Drew Aller, like I said. Drew Aller's been much better than Riley Leonard handling pressure. In fact, he's been one of the better quarterbacks I almost said in the NFL, in college football this year, handling pressure. I mean, an A- pressure to sack rate, A+ turnover worthy play rate, QB rating, yards per attempt, B+. He's been great handling pressure so far this year. So you love to see that, considering he should be under some pressure in this one. And also, kind of mirror what I said on the other side of the ball, Notre Dame runs a ton of man coverage. In fact, they're first in man coverage frequency. Penn State, one of the most successful passing attacks in the country against man coverage. Look at the bottom left of this graphic. They've been great throwing the ball on man. So it's not a bad matchup for Drew Aller in that respect. He just hasn't been playing his best football in terms of throwing it. So I don't really have a ton of faith in Drew Aller throwing the ball. That being said, I do think Penn State is able to run the ball, and I think that defense is able to cause all kinds of problems for Notre Dame. In my opinion, the wrong team is favored here. I make this Penn State -2. So I'm in on Penn State. I didn't get a 2.5. I got a +2. I still like it at +1.5. I think they win. So I'm on Penn State +2. As far as a total, I'd probably lean under, but honestly, 44.5 is pretty sharp, pretty on point. Both teams should be trying to establish the run here, so I would imagine it stays under that total, maybe a Notre Dame team total under. So I lean under, but my bet that I personally have money on, Penn State +2. Let's do it, Franklin. I'm a Penn State Nittany Lion for this one. Live show is going to be at 4 p.m. Oh, I'm sorry. Live show is going to be at 11 a.m. Eastern time. We have Andy's funeral service in the afternoon. So we're going to do a morning show at 11 a.m. Eastern time. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Let's have ourselves a good one. If you want to see the bets I personally have down, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. You'll see all mine as well as everyone else on the staff here. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up at the Discord if you need me.